Hey everybody, welcome to Matt Connarton Unleashed for Wednesday, September 23rd, 2015. This is, of course, the television edition, and thank you again, by the way, to John Hopwood for having me on his program, Ward 13, to talk about hypnosis and hypnotherapy, so that was a lot of fun, and that'll get posted online, of course, if you missed it. I should have fixed my hair before the show. My hair is like I'm having a weird hair day. You ever just have a day where your hair just is very strange? Of course, I got it cut a few weeks ago. I decided not to do what I did last year, which was basically to just go an entire year without a haircut. So I think those days might be behind me. I don't want to be the guy with long hair with the receding hairline. That just looks terrible. You ever see those dudes with the they have the ponytail, but they're bald on top? That will never be me. So welcome to the show, and oh, I just got a very nice compliment from someone. So thank you again, though, to John, and we'll make sure that gets posted. Actually, once that goes up on YouTube, I'll make sure, too, to post that onto the, share the link on the Matt Connarton Hypnotherapist page on Facebook, so that, you can see that, and it's kind of the other side of me. On this show I become unleashed, but I can also be very relaxing and mesmerizing, but not right now because we have politics to discuss. Couple quick programming notes, by the way. Next week, right here on Matt Connarton Unleashed, I will have a guest for the television edition. The wonderful Dr. Kevin Ross Emery will be here, or simply Dr. Kevin, as he's more commonly known these days. And he has returned from his trip to the UK. He is right here in New England. I got to see him yesterday, spend some time with him, have a little meeting, and talk some business, and he's also a very good friend, so always a good time. So he will be here with me next week, and we'll talk about all kinds of cool stuff. Also, too, quick reminder, the event this Saturday. I'm not sure. I got to check with Norm on the times. I think it's probably 10 to 5, but it's at the Unitarian Universalist Church right here in Manchester, New Hampshire, Norm's psychic event. But it's not just psychics there. I will be there. I'm not a psychic, although I know that I'm going to be there, so perhaps you could argue that I am psychic because I can foretell that. But that's just because I accepted the invitation to be there. So I'll be there, of course. I'm not myself a psychic of any kind or any of that, but I am as I mentioned, a certified hypnotherapist. So it's been a long time, actually. It'll be like old times. It's been a long time since I've done one of Norm's events. So there's going to be a lot of cool people there. I don't know the list, but Norm will be there, obviously. I assume his co-host, Lori, will be there. I'll be there, and a lot of other cool people, some of whom I know and some of whom I'll be meeting for the first time will be there. So that's this coming Saturday, the 26th. And like I said, I'll double check on the time with Norm, but I'm assuming it's 10 to 5. So if you're in the area, come on down and see me. And if you're not in the area, that's worth the drive. I know a lot of people watch this online from other places, so let's see. I don't really want to do any more housekeeping. Let's just jump right into some issues because I have a lot of stuff that I want to talk about, and we'll see how much we can get to. With the presidential race in terms of the primary season. Well, it's not even primary season yet. That won't be until we have our first in the nation primary here in New Hampshire, and that's a little bit a ways yet. But we have some interesting characters, of course, running on the Republican side and on the Democratic side. But we have a call. Let's grab this really quick. Hi, welcome to Matt Connarton Unleashed. Who's on the line?
Hey, Matt.
Norm.
It is going to be from 10 to 4.
10 to 4. Okay.
And also, I have to be humble and admit. You two had oh God, this hurts me to be good. You two had a very good show with you and the other person on, so I will be complimentary to it. It actually was a very good show. And,
well, thank you, Norm.
You know me, I don't like to give out too many compliments.
Well, I appreciate that, Norm. Thank you very much.
We actually have several readers coming in, and we have a former WWF superstar coming in as well.
Who's that?
So it's going to be a good show. And anyone that wants to come in, we are at the Unitarian Universalist Church. Mm-hmm. And Matt is going to be wearing a micro mini skirt with a halter top.
Well, I'm going to give that all the consideration it deserves as far as the outfit.
You'll you later.
I haven't picked out the outfit yet, Norm. All right, thank you, Norm. That was, of course, Norm from Norm and Friends, and so the event is 10 to 4 on Saturday. I don't think I can pull off that outfit that Norm was referring to. I think I'm just too hairy. I'm just going to put it out there. I'm a hairy beast. But let's see. It's sort of an embarrassment of riches as far as what we can start with, because there is so much happening with colorful characters like Trump in the race. And of course, we have Ben Carson, Dr. Ben Carson, who got in a little bit of trouble for saying on Meet the Press that he doesn't think that a Muslim can be president. Of course, a lot of the Republicans probably hear me say that and think, oh, we already have a Muslim president. Barack Obama's a Muslim. I know that not all Republicans believe that, but a lot of Republicans do. They talk about him as though he is, in fact, a secret Kenyan-born Muslim terrorist who I assume they believe on his final day in office will issue an executive order on his way out the door declaring that the country is now under some sort of hybrid of communism and Sharia law, Shariaism or something. I personally don't believe that, but I know a lot of Republicans do feel that way. I don't. I think it's going to be okay, guys. So I'm almost not sure where to start. So we'll just pick something. Actually, I want to say something. We'll get to the Ben Carson and Trump stuff in a little bit, but I want to compliment Senator Kelly Ayotte, our very own Kelly Ayotte from right here in New Hampshire, because she is behaving like the adult in the room in terms of how the Republican Party is handling, how Congress is handling this whole government shutdown nonsense. I've been very complimentary. I think it was last week I discussed the Republican candidate for president, whom I find the least repulsive, Ohio Governor John Kasich, who has said he doesn't believe it is appropriate or responsible for Congress to force a government shutdown, for the Republicans to force a government shutdown in an attempt to defund Planned Parenthood. He doesn't think that that's a good idea, and I agree with him. He cited, of course, that Obama is going to veto any effort to defund Planned Parenthood anyway, and the votes aren't there to override that veto, certainly. So while in principle you might think it's a good idea, he might think it's a good idea, he acknowledges that practically and pragmatically it's just a bad idea. Also, too, I hate to tell you, but every time you shut down the government, it costs the United States economy billions of dollars. You are actually, if you decide to try to force a government shutdown just to get your way, you are damaging the economy to try to get your way, which is stupid. But that, a lot of these Republicans seem to think it's a good idea, Ted Cruz and the others. Trump kind of flip-flopped on it. At one point, he said he would absolutely shut down the government to defund Planned Parenthood, and then he changed his mind on that, although not because he acknowledged that shutting down the government wrecks the economy, but because he actually acknowledged that Planned Parenthood does a lot more than just abortions. We did talk on the show last week about, broke down some of the numbers in terms of what Planned Parenthood actually does. And we concluded that it's about 12%. 12% of what they do is abortions. Not the 99.999% that most Republicans would like to have you believe. So John Kasich came out and said, this is a bad idea. Now our very own Republican Senator Kelly Ayotte has also come out and said this is a bad idea. And she's not doing so meekly either. She's coming right out and pretty boldly and bluntly saying this is a bad idea. This went up on HuffPost yesterday, last night. Lori Barron Lopez wrote this. They can't answer the question, what's the end game for success here? Those are Kelly Ayotte's words. Let me read this to you quickly. In a matter of days, the government could shut down if Congress doesn't pass a continuing resolution to keep it open for a few more months. And Ayotte said Tuesday that she is tired of the games her party is playing, taking her own party to task on this. I think this is excellent. Earlier in the day, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, Republican of Kentucky, set up a procedural vote on a measure that would fund the government at current spending levels until December 11th. while also defunding Planned Parenthood for 1 year. That vote, which will take place Thursday, is expected to fail as Democrats have vowed to block any measure stripping the family planning provider of funding. In a roughly 15-minute rant on the Senate floor, which she also broadcast on her Twitter account, Ayotte said the tactic only brings the government closer to the brink of shutdown. The senator, who is up for re-election in 2016, chided her fellow Republicans for pushing a strategy she argues is, quote, a game of chicken. Those are her words. She also said this, quote, I'm tired of playing political games. I'm tired of the president's game on this. I'm tired of the people on my side of the aisle who are pushing this strategy, even though they know they don't have the votes to pass the U.S. Senate, and they certainly don't have the votes to override a presidential veto, unquote. Good for her. Good for her. Ayotte said she asked her Republican colleagues who support tethering Planned Parenthood to government funding where they think they will get the votes to reach 60, the number needed simply to pass the bill, and then the 67 needed to override a veto by President Obama. It's a question Ayotte said she also asked in 2013 when the last shutdown happened over Republican attempts to defund Obamacare. Quote, we saw the movie in 2013, and I don't think we should relive that movie. Let's remember what happened when you shut down the government and you reopen it. It costs you more money. So if you care about the fiscal state of the country, let's not waste money shutting the government down with no result, unquote. Ayotte said that while she wants to redirect Planned Parenthood's funds to community health centers as much as the next Republican does, the current strategy isn't the way to do it. She also said, quote, and so therefore they can't answer the question, what's the end game for success here? Even if you feel as passionately about these issues as we all do, the answer is they don't know the answer, unquote. Republicans have tried multiple times to defund the family planning provider, but the recent push comes after the release of heavily edited undercover videos from an anti-abortion group alleging that Planned Parenthood traffics in baby parts. The organization does donate fetal tissue for research, which is legal. And the videos were found to be manipulated many times over, according to fact checkers. Ayotte said the picking a fight over Planned Parenthood now would only undermine the pro-life cause. Rather than have political show votes, she charged, the Senate should vote on, quote, a clean funding bill now so that we aren't wasting time. I cannot in good conscience participate again in this process when I have not heard a strategy for success, unquote. Again, excellent. Asked who else in her conference shares her view, Ayotte told the Huffington Post after her speech that, quote, there is a lot of support in our caucus not to shut the government down, unquote. At least one GOP senator agrees with her. Senator John McCain said that a clean spending bill to keep the government open is the direction in which the Senate ought to end up moving. McConnell himself has said multiple times since August that the Senate doesn't have the votes to defund Planned Parenthood and that attaching the defunding provision to a resolution to keep the government open would be a futile exercise. If Thursday's votes fail, the Senate will need to bring up a clean funding bill almost immediately in order to prevent a shutdown, and the House will have to follow quickly thereafter. One of these things, and Senator Ayotte herself referred to in 2013 when they did the government shutdown to try to defund Obamacare. I'm reminded of the how many times now? Is it something like 40 or 50? I think it's got to be over 50 now times that they've voted to repeal Obamacare. Over the past several years, and it's just for show. It's silly. Why do something that is not going to actually accomplish anything? If you know you don't have the votes to do it, then why are you voting to do it instead of working on things that you can actually affect change practically and pragmatically? I don't believe that this is what we send our so-called representatives to Washington to do, is to, engage in this sort of theater and do this stuff that's really just doesn't accomplish anything. So I'm really glad that she came out and said what she said. Meanwhile, so we mentioned Mitch McConnell in that. This also went up yesterday on HuffPost. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell set up a contentious battle Tuesday that could shut down the government, offering up a bill that links federal spending with the Republican push to defund Planned Parenthood. But McConnell announced that rather than move a short-term measure to keep the government operating and thus give Democrats and Republicans time to compromise on a longer plan, he will push a bill that defunds the family health care provider. So, we don't need to read all of that, but you know what's going on there already. But it's just madness, and I would like to hear more voices like Kelly Ayotte speaking up and saying, let's not do this. This is stupid, like John Kasich. There was, let's see, Bill O'Reilly seems to be... well, Donald Trump, of course, he's had some criticism of Fox News, and it's rare that you see Republicans so outspoken against Fox News, but Trump has had a contentious relationship with them, with Megyn Kelly, and then I guess Roger Ailes was able to come to some sort of an agreement with Trump, but I saw this right before I went on the air last night for the radio edition of Unleashed. I saw this pop up online that something about, and it was a clickbait posting, not on HuffPost, but on another site, where it said, breaking news, Donald Trump explodes at Bill O'Reilly. And there didn't seem to really be anything there. Again, it's clickbait where they put something that, they post something that sounds like it's a big deal. And in reality, it's not what it sounds like, but it's designed to get you to click it. So it sounded like Trump went on O'Reilly and just blew up at him, which is not exactly what happened. But this, courtesy of Gabriel Arena on HuffPost, wrote this: Trump's campaign just theater like The Apprentice. He also thinks this tweeting thing is hurting the candidate. So this is Bill O'Reilly's thoughts on Trump. Donald Trump had tweeted O'Reilly and said, "Why don't you have some knowledgeable talking heads on your show for a change instead of the same old Trump haters? Boring." So I'll read this quickly. Despite Fox News chairman and CEO Roger Ailes' peacemaking efforts with Donald Trump, the Republican presidential candidate is back on the warpath against the network. Trump zeroed in on Fox host Bill O'Reilly on Twitter Monday evening for hosting guests who are critical of him, particularly National Review's Rich Lowry, who slammed the reality TV star's habit of saying he has a plan for something but declining to reveal what it is. On Tuesday's episode of The Today Show, O'Reilly, who is promoting his latest book, Killing Reagan, responded to the criticism, stressing Trump's role as an entertainer. Now, what's interesting about this to me is, and this is why this caught my eye, I've been saying that in some ways it sometimes appears that it's not Donald Trump, the real estate mogul, who's running for president. It's Donald Trump, the television personality, who's running for president. He almost seems like a caricature of himself at times, especially when he says things that the Donald Trump of as recently as 2012 you didn't hear saying. He seems to say a lot of things that don't sound like his previous positions on things, but he says exactly what the conservative base of the Republican Party wants to hear on his way to the nomination. That's why some people even think he's a plant. Actually, Alex Jones, the conspiracy theorist, I saw something, and I like Alex Jones. I think he's entertaining. I don't believe his BS, but I think he's entertaining. He had something up on InfoWars about claiming that Trump is a plant by an anti-Tea Party group to make, the Republicans look silly. Some other people have floated that theory too, that he's secretly working with the Clintons to wreck the Republicans' chances of recapturing the White House in 2016. There's moments I've wondered about that myself, to be honest with you. But here's what O'Reilly went on to say about Trump. Quote, "I think this is just an extension of his reality show, The Apprentice. This is just theater right now. He gets a lot of attention from the theater," unquote. The Fox News host also suggested Twitter spelled trouble for the candidate. He said, quote, "I've known Trump a long time. He wants people to like him. When people criticize him, he takes it personally. And then this machine, this tweeting thing, that's the worst thing you can give Donald Trump is this tweeting thing," unquote. Still, O'Reilly does understand Trump's appeal. He's a non-politician in a country that's really in trouble and thinks he has been good for our political discourse. I think Trump has been good for politics in America. He has engaged people. He has forced people to pay attention. So kind of a mixed message, but when O'Reilly talks about, it being theater and whatnot, it reminds me of some of my thoughts about Trump, the television character that is running for president. Somebody else at Fox News, though, who's a little bit fed up in his own way with Trump is Chris Wallace, who hosts Fox News Sunday, Fox's Sunday morning program, political program, similar to, Meet the Press and Face the Nation and whatnot. I've had a lot of criticisms of Fox News over the years. I believe that their key demographic, the average age of the Fox News viewer, according to the last survey I saw, was 70 years old. 70-year-old white males are the key demographic there for Fox. So Fox doesn't appeal to me very much. I am a white male, but I'm not 70 years old. But I can tell you that there are a few people at Fox, or at least two, whom I've always said I think actually care about something on some level called journalism. One of them is Shepard Smith, and the other one is Chris Wallace. And Chris Wallace said something very interesting. It says here, Chris Wallace stands up to Donald Trump, won't let him phone in, going off script with the Fox News Sunday host. The way Trump has been conducting his campaign thus far, he spends a lot of time calling into these different political shows. Now, he did that before. This is not a new thing for him. Even before he was running for president, he was a very frequent caller on Fox News Sunday. I'm sorry, not on Fox News Sunday, on Fox and Friends, the unbearable program that they run in the morning with Steve Ducey. I know that's not really how you say his last name. And Brian Kilmeade and whoever the blonde is that sits between them currently. Just brutal stuff, but brainless. But so I remember Trump started calling in there on a pretty regular basis back when he was really heavy into the whole birther thing. Remember, Donald Trump at one time was king of the birthers, and we'll be circling back around to this later. With this whole, I challenge the president to show us his birth certificate, etc. And then the president did, and then of course everyone, it's a fake. Pretty amazing conspiracy theory if it is one that when Barack Obama was this idea that Barack Obama 50 years ago was, however old he is, was born in Kenya, and they were grooming him to be the president someday, so they have to hide that he was born in Kenya. That's if you really break it down logically, it's really pretty bizarre that there's people who really believe this. Anyway, so Trump gets a lot of airtime just by calling into these shows, these different political shows. Apparently, Chris Wallace on Fox News Sunday has said, no, we're not doing that anymore, or we're not doing that at all. This is interesting. This is what he said to HuffPost. He said, quote, the one thing the Sunday shows still do that stand out is that we are the one place that you have long, in-depth, well-researched, probing interviews, unquote. And that's true, by the way. These shows like Meet the Press, and Face the Nation, and Fox News Sunday. And I give credit where it's due. There's not a lot of Fox News that I can stomach. Because I don't enjoy the burning sensation in the back of my throat when comes up a little bit. But Fox News Sunday is tolerable, and I think Chris Wallace genuinely cares about journalism, and he's right, because if you turn on the shows, the nighttime shows, whether it's on Fox or MSNBC or whatnot, you tend to get a lot of these talking heads yelling at each other and talking in sound bites, and it's not terribly substantive. It can be very entertaining, but not always very substantive. So I think he's right. I mean, these shows and C-SPAN, there's long-form interviews that you can see on C-SPAN where they really go in depth on things, but the Sunday morning shows have been kind of a haven for this kind of thing. As the show celebrated its 1,000th episode over the weekend, Wallace doubled down on his commitment to in-depth reporting, saying his program stands out from other Sunday political programs like Meet the Press and Face the Nation that have begun airing shorter interviews and more segments. To that point, Wallace has declined to allow Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump to phone into the program. Wallace said, quote, "Prior to this cycle, I'd never seen a presidential candidate doing a phone interview, and we're not going to do it on Fox News Sunday," unquote. And he did add that he thinks a phoner debases the currency. So good for him. Trump did, however, call in to 3 other Sunday programs this week. He called in NBC's Meet the Press. I'm surprised they played ball with that. He called in ABC's This Week and CNN's State of the Union. So they will still take his call instead of having him in the studio. Networks typically only allow reporters and other guests to call in by phone during breaking news situations, but appear to have made multiple exceptions to accommodate Donald Trump. Now, what's interesting about that is, and I talked about it as either last week or the week before, CNN's been taking some flack over allowing this, and the coverage, the amount of the coverage that they've been giving to Trump, and their response, and I would agree, is that, Jeff Zucker and Jake Tapper said, well, look, he's the front runner. So if he wants to call in, if the front runner for the Republican nomination for president wants to call in, we're going to take his call and put him on the air. So, and I would agree with that. But I like the stand that Chris Wallace has taken in the name of journalistic integrity. I like that as well. Wallace said in-depth programs like his, which can accommodate longer interviews, are important during election seasons to get politicians to answer tough questions. Now, and I agree with that, but what's funny about that is with Trump, would it matter, ultimately, if you have him on the phone or if you have him with you in the studio? Trump will be Trump regardless of the circumstances, so I don't know that it matters. While I appreciate the stand Chris Wallace is taking, does it automatically matter with a candidate like Trump? He said, quote, "All of these candidates are so skilled with their talking points and their scripts, and you have to go at them to get them off the script, and think and reacting in real time. That means not only asking a question, but asking a follow-up, and sometimes a follow-up to a follow-up," unquote. Wallace did just this on Sunday when he grilled presidential candidate Carly Fiorina on claims she made about Planned Parenthood during CNN's GOP presidential debate. Fiorina described watching a grisly video in which an aborted fetus's heart continues to beat while Planned Parenthood staff discusses how to harvest its brain. Fact checkers, however, have pointed out that no such video exists, though anti-abortion group the Center for Medical Progress has released a video in which a former Planned Parenthood employee describes such a scene. By the way, I remember that moment in the debate when Fiorina made this claim about the video, and my BS meter just redlined when she said it. I knew there was no way that was true. It turns out it wasn't true. Wallace said to Fiorina in the segment, quote, "As horrific as that scene is, it was only described on the video by someone who has claimed to see it. There is no actual footage of the incident you just mentioned," unquote. Fiorina, sticking to her lie, responded, quote, "No, I don't accept that at all. I've seen the footage, and I find it amazing, actually, that all these supposed fact checkers in the mainstream media claim this doesn't exist," unquote. I think they claim it doesn't exist because no one has seen it other than Carly Fiorina seeing it in her mind. So I would just like to take a moment to say to all of you who may be Carly Fiorina supporters, maybe conservative Republicans, maybe very pro-life, you can hold that position, you can like her, whatever, but let's just understand this. She is a liar. She is talking about something that no one else has seen. How did she see it? And no one else has seen it. Even fellow pro-lifers are not coming forward and saying, "Oh yeah, we've seen that exact video she described." No one is saying they've seen it. Wallace, who co-moderated the first GOP debate, didn't shy away from comparing Fox News' performance with CNN's. He said, quote, "I liked our debate better. Among other things, I thought it was better at 2 hours rather than 3 hours. I thought that CNN spent too much time trying to pick fights. Some of them were over legitimate issues, and some of them were about, he said this about you, what do you say to him? I thought some of those didn't go anywhere," unquote. I would disagree with that. I think the longer debate that CNN did was necessary because you had 11 people on that stage, for one thing. I remember we were watching the debate in the studio, and I was surprised when I realized, because they typically go 90 minutes to 2 hours, and I was surprised when I realized that this one was pushing past the 2-hour mark, and I think it clocked in at like 3 hours and 20 minutes total. But then I realized at some point, it occurred to me, there's 11 people there. There's a lot of people in this debate, so that's why they go longer. And I disagree with Chris Wallace's analysis of it. I thought CNN did a fine job. Donald Trump also said that night he thought CNN did a fine job. And then, I don't know, a couple days later, he was trashing them over it. Very, very strange. Last week, CNN's Republican debate brought in over 22 million viewers, while more than 24 million tuned into Fox's GOP debate last month. I've always said that I thought the 2012 Republican debates were some of the best television ever, and until now, these debates have been even better so far. But I'm glad to see that. I'm glad that Chris Wallace is taking that stand to protect the integrity of his show. And like I said, I mean, there are a couple of people at Fox who I think actually care about journalism and not just being, sort of a PR firm for the Republican Party. Let's talk about the Republican Party's, or these candidates at least, their relationship with Muslims. Trump got into some trouble. He's been under some fire for someone expressed a concern about Muslims and Obama and all this. And Trump, the criticism Trump has taken, not because of anything he said in this instance, but some folks have criticized him, his fellow candidates have criticized him for not taking a stand in terms of the question and not sort of defending Obama and saying, no, he's not a Muslim, or I don't believe he's a Muslim. Now, a couple things that are interesting about this. One being that, clearly now Trump has been the front runner long enough that you have to take him seriously as a front runner, and these other candidates have to take him seriously. Last poll I saw, and this may have even increased, I don't know, but last poll I saw had him at 40% in terms of the New Hampshire primary voters, first in the nation primary, and 40% with a field this crowded is very significant. I mean, that makes him the very clear front runner. I think, and behind him currently, I don't know if it's Carly Fiorina or Ben Carson. They've both done well and gained a lot of ground, but neither of them is still, I don't think, anywhere near touching Trump. So these other candidates have had to, been forced to begin taking him seriously and attacking him, and they're responding to the things he says. And, I said from the beginning, from when he announced, I said, take him lightly at your peril. I think he's going to do much better. Because when he first got in, and of course Bill O'Reilly is still talking about him this way, but when he first got in, a lot of people said, well, it doesn't matter how good his poll numbers are. He's a novelty candidate, and he's going to flame out really fast. And that hasn't happened. So it's interesting to see how the other Republican candidates are reacting to him and how they're now attacking him. What is also interesting, though, is if you're going to criticize Trump for his reaction to the guy at the event who made the comments about Obama and about Muslims and this and that, because the criticism is, well, Trump should have defended Obama, and Trump should apologize for not doing so, or not telling that guy he was wrong, or whatnot. And instead, Trump just said something sort of generic like, well, there's a lot of things that we're going to be looking at, whatever that means. If you are going to criticize Trump, though, for that, then you have to accept the premise that Trump is somehow responsible for something someone says at his campaign rally. And while I thought that the guy's comment to Trump was ridiculous, I don't know that I have a problem with how Trump handled it. We were at an event. Jen Coffey and I, we were at an event, at a Trump event. This was before Trump announced, right here in New Hampshire, when he was still in the exploratory phase, where a woman asked Trump about, during the Q&A, what are you going to do about Sharia law? These Muslims, they want to impose Sharia law on all of us, which, to me is very just sort of paranoid, crazy talk, but okay. And Trump just said, well, he didn't try to correct her or confront her or roll his eyes or anything like that. I was certainly rolling mine, and so was Jen, but he said something to the effect of, well, look, we're not going to change our laws. We're going to follow the Constitution. In other words, we're not going to have Sharia law. We're going to follow our laws. He never actually repeated the phrase Sharia law, though. He just said, our laws are our laws, and we're going to follow them, etc. I thought he handled it fine. He didn't answer the question directly, thus risking dignifying the ridiculous question with a serious answer. Didn't feed into it. He just kind of said, well, our laws are our laws. I don't really have a problem with the way he handled this guy the other day either. Now, it does pale compared to the way, if you remember, and if you haven't seen it, or if you haven't seen it lately, if you want to revisit it, of course, you can easily find it on YouTube. There was an incident at two instances actually at a campaign rally for John McCain back in 2008, where first this guy gets up, they were passing the mic around, and this guy says to McCain, I don't trust Obama. I think he's a Muslim. I think he's a terrorist or whatever. And McCain, when he took the mic back from him, said no. And this drew boos from the crowd. But McCain did the right thing, and he handled it correctly. He said, no, sir, he is not. Obama's a good man. You have nothing to fear from an Obama presidency, meaning that, he's not really a terrorist. He's a good family man. We just disagree on policy. We have political disagreements. That's all. And I thought that was very classy. And I've had a lot of criticism of McCain, but he also has impressed me on many occasions, and that was one of them. And the crowd booed him for it, or some people in the crowd booed him for it, and he said, no, it's, he's a good man. We just disagree. And then this woman, a very old woman, from a different time, different generation, but she's got the mics, and she's saying, I don't trust Obama. He's an Arab. And of course, by that, she meant Muslim. But, and then McCain very quickly grabbed the mic back from her and said, no, ma'am, he is not. He's a good man, and we just disagree. Not that it's, he would be a bad man if he were a Muslim, but just trying to clarify that no, and he's not who you think he is. So I thought that was very good. Now, Romney, of course, found himself in similar circumstances in 2012 and kind of handled it the same way Trump did. Just kind of blew it off. And I remember at the time thinking, and I think I said it on this show, yeah, there's no way Romney would handle that. Romney wouldn't have the class to handle that the same way McCain did, to be very blunt about it. But so, Trump handled it the way he handled it. But, you also have to think about it, too. I mean, what do you expect from the guy who is the king of the birthers? I mean, he was the one offering, all this. I think at one point, he was offering all this money if Obama would show us his birth certificate or whatever. And then Obama finally released his certificate of live birth and said, let's get this out of the way and whatnot. So, I would not expect, I would be shocked if Donald Trump said, no, I believe Barack Obama. I take him at his word. He's a Christian. And he didn't do that. He didn't say that. And that's where the criticism is aimed at. But again, do you want to hold a candidate responsible for someone says at his rally just because maybe the candidate doesn't respond exactly the way that you think they should have? And I'm not so sure I want to hold him responsible for that. Now, having said all that, we then have Ben Carson, who we got a couple things to tackle with Dr. Carson, but Ben Carson said on Meet the Press, and took a lot of criticism and got in a lot of trouble for this, said that he doesn't believe that a Muslim, he doesn't believe that Islam is compatible with the presidency. In other words, he sort of contradicted himself a little bit during his interview with Chuck Todd, because he sort of indicates that there shouldn't be a religious test, as is stated in the Constitution, for holding office, but then does say that he doesn't believe Islam is compatible. So in other words, he would not be comfortable with a Muslim as president. Now, since then, he has walked that back and clarified that he doesn't have a problem with that, but what he said is what he said, and it actually helped him, and it's helped him raise quite a bit of money. Now, and we'll get to that in a moment, but I myself am in a little bit of a quandary here in terms of how I feel about this, and I'll explain. Now, I do like to make fun of Islamophobia, as you know. There are these people walking around who think that the Muslims are taking over, and that any day now we're going to have Sharia law everywhere, and all the women are going to be forced to wear burqas, and I'm sorry, I just don't see it. But I know some very paranoid people who do see that. So, okay. But I make fun of it, and I'm also very, very committed to separation of church and state. Here's the thing, though. So while I am not myself an Islamophobe, and we have, by the way, I know there's at least one Muslim serving in the United States Congress. His last name is Ellis. Is it Keith Ellis? Oh, no, Ellison. Ellison. Is it Keith Ellison? He's openly Muslim. He's not a terrorist. He's a U.S. congressman. I think he's from Florida. But here's, though, where my own conflict comes in. I can sit here and say Ben Carson is being ridiculous for expressing his concern over the idea of a person of a certain faith being president. And again, we have a history of this kind of thing. When JFK was elected president, there were people worried about that. Well, he's Catholic. He was our first Catholic president. I guess our only Catholic president, right? John Kerry would have been our second, I think, if he had won. But, there was this concern. Well, he's going to answer to, he's going to follow the Constitution, or is he going to answer to the Pope? Is he going to be beholden to the Vatican ahead of the Constitution? And, of course, JFK won because, for one thing, he made it very clear that, that he would take an oath to the country, to the Constitution, and that comes first, no matter what, if he elected president. So this is not a new thing, concerns over faith. And, I don't personally believe, by the way, that there is much chance of, in my lifetime, us actually electing a Muslim president. But then again, I also didn't think that, that we would necessarily see a black president in my lifetime. And then that happened. I thought we'd see a woman president before we saw a black guy, to be honest with you. I'm glad that I was wrong. I think it definitely says something about how far we've come. Although we still have a long way to go, of course. But so I don't think this is going to happen. I also don't think that we will see necessarily in my lifetime an atheist president, or at least a president who is openly atheist. I suspect there's a lot more atheists that serve in government than we know about. But, you can't say I'm an atheist and run for office. I mean, Jesse Ventura did win the governorship in Minnesota as an atheist. He's very open about his lack of religion, but he's an exception. But here's where my own personal conflict with this is. I can pick on the Islamophobes who are freaked out at the idea of a Muslim president, but I fear that it makes me a hypocrite to do so, because I have said, and some people are very offended by this, I understand this, the show's called Unleashed for a reason. I have said many times, I'm extremely uncomfortable with an evangelical Christian as president. Someone like Mike Huckabee, for example, an evangelical or a dominionist. I think Ted Cruz is a dominionist. I am uncomfortable with one of them being president because I'm uncomfortable with someone who religiously believes that Armageddon is ultimately a good thing, having access to nuclear weapons. That makes me uncomfortable. And I feel that way because, and I'm not, I know it sounds like I'm kidding or being facetious with this. I'm not. This is a genuine concern I have. Because unless I've misunderstood something, if you're an evangelical or a dominionist or something like that version of Christianity, then your belief is that Armageddon is a positive. It's a win because Armageddon brings about the second coming of Christ, and then everyone gets a free pony. Oh no, that's Vermin Supreme. But all kinds of really cool stuff is supposed to happen, I guess, when the second coming occurs, which of course occurs when we have Armageddon. And I have a concern about, I can just imagine. I remember just having these, back in 2008, just having these awful ideas like, what if McCain becomes president and something happens to McCain and we end up with Sarah Palin and we get into sort of a nuclear confrontation with Russia or China or China, as Trump likes to say. And then this idiot starts thinking that she's hearing the voice of God in her head saying, go ahead, Sarah, it's time. It's time. This is your destiny. I chose you for this moment, Sarah. And then next thing you know, she's launching missiles and it's all over because this moron, and I try not to speak in ad hominems on this show, but I make an exception for Sarah Palin. Sarah Palin, absolutely one of the dumbest people ever to emerge on the national stage, who actually was dangerously close to potentially being vice president, which made her dangerously close to potentially being president. Seriously, it's just dumb as a bag of hammers. And I can imagine her being the kind of idiot who would think that, maybe I'm supposed to cause Armageddon. So I have this concern. Mike Huckabee has said some very creepy stuff. He's another one. Ted Cruz, I think, has just an all-out Christ complex, but we'll put that aside. I don't want to get too deeply into that. But so I have a prejudice. I have my own sort of religious prejudice in terms of an evangelical Christian being president. So therefore, from that standpoint, I guess I can't really be too critical of someone like Ben Carson and what he said, because that would make me a hypocrite. Because while I do not share the Islamophobia, I do have a concern about a person of a particular type of religious belief being in charge of nuclear weapons with the ability to possibly destroy the world. So that's where I am on that. Having said that, this is interesting. Apparently, Ben Carson's comments helped him with the conservative Republican base. This does not surprise me. CNN reports Ben Carson said Wednesday he's pulling in lots of money amid all the backlash he's received for remarks he made regarding Muslims in politics. The retired neurosurgeon said he raised $1 million within 24 hours following the CNN debate on September 16th. And the donations have poured in after remarks he made over the weekend about Islam and the presidency. He said Wednesday morning on Fox News when asked about whether his comments had affected his donations. He said, quote, "The money has been coming in so fast, it's hard to even keep up with it. I remember the day of the last debate. Within 24 hours, we raised $1 million, and it's coming in at least at that rate, if not a bit faster," unquote. CNN will not be able to verify fundraising totals until the Federal Election Commission, until the quarter ends September 30th. Carson said Wednesday he has continued to receive support since saying that he would not support a Muslim in the White House. During an appearance on Meet the Press Sunday, NBC's Chuck Todd asked Carson, "Do you believe that Islam is consistent with the Constitution?" Carson responded, "No, I do not. I would not advocate that we put a Muslim in charge of this nation. I absolutely would not agree with that," unquote. There's that. So again, I want to pick on him about it, but I don't think someone like Ben Carson should necessarily be in the White House. I don't know if his beliefs are in line with the Constitution. Would Ben Carson put his own faith ahead of, because he's a deeply religious man, ahead of the presidency and the nation? And again, my comments before about an evangelical Christian, here's something that came up. This was on BuzzFeed yesterday. Ben Carson once said, and again, he's a neurosurgeon, he's a scientist of sorts, right? But he said this: the Big Bang is a fairy tale. The theory of evolution was encouraged by the devil. Now, this is not something new. A lot of these people, these evangelical Christian types, believe that, for example, dinosaur fossils were put there by Satan to confuse us. Yep. That's what a lot of these people believe. Ben Carson back in 2012 said, quote, I personally believe that this theory that Darwin came up with was something that was encouraged by the adversary, and it has become what is scientifically, politically correct, unquote. This is from BuzzFeed. Let me read this quickly because we are running short of time. Andrew Kaczynski and Molly Ward wrote this. In a speech delivered in 2012, Ben Carson said the Big Bang Theory was part of the fairy tales pushed by highfalutin scientists as a story of creation. Similarly, Carson, a noted creationist, said he believed the theory of evolution was encouraged by the devil. I love these people who view science as some sort of sorcery. It gives me a lot of confidence in them to lead us. Not really. Carson said at a speech to fellow Seventh-day Adventists titled Celebration of Creation about the theory for the origin of the universe, quote, now, what about the Big Bang Theory? I find the Big Bang really quite fascinating. I mean, here you have all these highfalutin scientists, and they're saying it was this gigantic explosion and everything came into perfect order. Now, these are the same scientists that go around touting the second law of thermodynamics, which is entropy, which says that things move toward a state of disorganization. So now you're going to have this big explosion and everything becomes perfectly organized, and when you ask them about it, they say, well, we can explain this based on probability theory, because if there's enough big explosions over a long period of time, billions and billions of years, one of them will be the perfect explosion. So I say, what you're telling me is if I blow a hurricane through a junkyard enough times over billions and millions of years, eventually, after one of those hurricanes, there will be a 747 fully loaded and ready to fly, unquote. Carson added that he believed the Big Bang Theory was even more ridiculous because there is order to the universe. I don't even want to read the rest of this. Yeah, because, the invisible man created everything in 6 days sounds so much more reasonable than science. I'm not even an atheist, but, really, I mean, and by the way, I was raised Catholic. I was raised in a Catholic home. We were actually taught not to take the Old Testament literally, that those were parables, those were stories. New Testament, yes, history of Christ and moving forward. Old Testament, not so much. That's what we were taught. Not that I continue to be Catholic, because I don't like the way, the whole kid touching and then covering up for these people so they don't get prosecuted. I have a bit of a problem with that. I do like the new Pope, though. Well, he's not new anymore, but he still seems fresh and new because he's so not evil compared to previous popes that I just kind of dig the guy. By the way, quick observation. I know we're running short on time. Yesterday, I'm on my way somewhere in the Jeep, and I hear, I'm a radio guy, and I like to hit scan. I still, to this day, I will turn on the FM radio in the car and hit scan and see what I land on, and just scan through until I land on something that sounds interesting. I like to know what's going on out there in radio land. And there are a couple of Christian stations in the area, and I've landed on this one. I forget the name of it, but it's a couple of Catholic guys who, it's a talk show and people call in. And, I've talked on the show about how you've got a lot of pro-lifers now who are now claiming that science proves that life begins at conception, even though I don't think any scientist anywhere has ever said that. But now they just tell you, the pro-lifers, they just say, oh yeah, science has proved it, that we were right all along. This is a narrative that has emerged lately. I hear this all the time on Gary's show. When I co-host Rock, Paper, Hand Grenades with him, pro-lifers will come on and say, well, science has proven that we were right. Okay, I don't know what scientists you're talking about. So last night I hear this show and I stopped to listen to it. Well, I didn't stop. I didn't pull over. I'm driving, but I left it there and I'm listening to it. And I hear this woman call into this show claiming that there's these scientists now that are claiming that the creationists were right and that the earth is only 6,000 years old, and that science is now proving that that's true. And that there's all these scientists that are now saying that it's true that the earth is only 6,000 years old. I'm seeing a pattern here. When science says something other than what these people want to believe, they just, and they can't fight what science is saying, they just suddenly decide, oh, we'll just claim that science says we're right, even though no scientist anywhere ever has said that we're right. By the way, to their credit, the hosts of the show said that she was wrong about that science does not say that the earth is only 6,000 years old. But then again, this was a Catholic program, and a lot of Catholics say don't take the Old Testament literally, so therefore they're a little more enlightened in that way. But yeah, this woman calling in, well, you know, science now says that we were right. Well, no, it doesn't. But I guess that's the trend, and, you know, I don't know. I'll be interested to see what these people decide. They just randomly decide science also has proven them correct about. Maybe science has proven that the Loch Ness Monster is real just all of a sudden. Because after all, there are textbooks in public schools in Louisiana, and I talked about this once on the show, where they claim that the Loch Ness Monster is real and is actually a leftover dinosaur, thus proving that dinosaurs and humans can coexist at the same time, thus proving creation, which makes no sense logically or otherwise, but science says it. It's in a science book. It must be true. Yes, I am very, very committed still to the idea of separation of church and state. Very important to me. That'll do it. We are out of time on this week's television edition of Unleashed. I will be back, of course, later with Gary. And also, I have a text message from Norm. I've been invited to go on Norm and Friends for the second hour. He has a guest for the first hour, which works out well. Because I'll be able to get back here in time for the second hour of that, and then Gary's show after that. Don't forget, we have the big event. I'll be participating in Norm's psychic event this weekend, Saturday, at the Unitarian Universalist Church, right here in Manchester, New Hampshire. Next week on the television edition, Dr. Kevin Ross Emery will be here with me. He will be my guest, and don't forget the radio edition of Unleashed, now 5 nights a week on the IPM Nation live station on Channel 1, because we now have 2 channels on the live station. So we'll be on, well, tonight. And of course, every Tuesday and Thursday, also on Home Times Radio. All right, that's it. I'm out of here. Thank you again to John Hopwood for having me on earlier on Ward 13, and I will talk at you all later. Bye.